My grandmother died 3 months ago at the age of 91. Her name was Eleanor Sutton, and she was the kind of woman everyone in town knew and respected. Former schoolteacher, church volunteer, the person who always brought casseroles when someone was sick. She lived in the same house in Millbrook, Washington for 67 years, raised 3 kids there, outlived 2 husbands, and as far as anyone knew, lived a quiet, unremarkable life. I'm her only granddaughter, Meredith. 26 years old, working as a paralegal in Seattle, about 2 hours from Millbrook. Growing up, I spent every summer at Grandma Eleanor's house. It was one of those classic Pacific Northwest homes, 2 stories, white with green shutters, a massive oak tree in the front yard, a wraparound porch perfect for reading on rainy afternoons. I have nothing but good memories of that place. When she died peacefully, in her sleep, exactly how she would have wanted, she left the house to me. Not to my mom or my uncle, but specifically to me. The will was very clear about that. My mom seemed a little hurt but said Grandma had always had a special bond with me, which was true. We'd been close. Or at least, I thought we'd been close. Turns out, I didn't know her at all. I took a week off work in late September to go through the house and decide what to keep, what to donate, what to sell. My mom offered to help, but I told her I wanted to do it alone. I think I needed the time to grieve in my own way, surrounded by Grandma's things, letting myself feel close to her one last time. The first few days were emotional but straightforward. I went through her clothes, her books, her kitchen stuff. I found old photo albums and spent hours looking at pictures of my mom as a kid, of Grandma when she was young and beautiful, of family gatherings I was too young to remember. I cried a lot, but it felt good, cathartic. Then I went up to the attic. The attic was one of those spaces that had always been off limits when I was a kid. Too dangerous, Grandma would say. Old wood, might fall through. And it's just junk up there anyway. I'd asked a few times to explore it. What kid doesn't want to poke around an attic? But she'd always deflected, and eventually I stopped asking. Now, standing at the pull-down ladder in the upstairs hallway, I realized I'd never actually been up there. Not once in all those childhood summers. The attic was hot and dusty, lit only by a single bare bulb and the weak light coming through a small window at one end. It was crammed with stuff, old furniture, boxes labeled Christmas decorations and Leonard's books. Leonard was her second husband, who died when I was 5, a dressmaker's dummy, stacks of National Geographic magazines from the 1970s. I started sorting through boxes, making piles of what could be thrown away versus what might have value or sentimental importance. Most of it was pretty standard attic fare: old curtains, broken lamps, my uncle's high school trophies. Then I found a locked trunk pushed way back in the corner, hidden behind a bunch of other boxes. It was old, probably from the 1940s or 50s, made of dark wood with tarnished brass corners. There was no key in sight, and it had a serious padlock on it. I tried to lift it, too heavy to carry down the ladder easily. Whatever was inside was substantial. I should mention that I'm not the kind of person who respects other people's privacy even after they're dead. I know some people would say, it was locked for a reason, leave it alone. But I'm nosy as hell, and it was my house now, technically. If Grandma had wanted the trunk's contents to remain secret forever, she should have destroyed them. So I went to the garage, found a crowbar, and pried that padlock right off. Inside the trunk, I found a life I didn't know existed. The first thing I saw was a wedding dress. Not Grandma's wedding dress from either of her marriages. I'd seen photos, knew what those looked like. This was different. A 1950s style dress, tea-length, cream-colored with delicate lace on the sleeves. Carefully preserved in tissue paper. Under the dress were stacks of letters, maybe 50 or 60 of them, all addressed to Eleanor with no last name, no return address. They were postmarked from various cities across the country: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver, all dated between 1954 and 1956. I opened one at random. The handwriting was neat, feminine. "My darling Eleanor," it began. "I miss you more than words can express. Every day without you feels like a year. I see your face in every crowd, hear your voice in every song. When will you let me come home? When will you stop punishing us both for loving each other?" It was signed simply, V. I sat back on my heels, completely confused. This was clearly a love letter. To my grandmother. From someone named V. A woman named V, based on the handwriting and tone. I opened another letter, then another. They were all similar, passionate, longing, desperate. They talked about a life they'd planned together, about promises made and broken, about wanting to come home but not being allowed. The later letters grew more bitter, more hurt. The last letter, postmarked October 1956, was different. I can't do this anymore, Eleanor. Waiting for you to change your mind, to be brave enough to choose us over what they expect of you. I understand why you made the choice you did. I even forgive you for it. But I can't keep waiting for you to choose me when you've made it clear you never will. I'm going to disappear. Really disappear, where no one can find me, where I can start over and maybe, eventually, forget you. Don't try to find me. Don't write. Let me go. V. Under the letters were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of my grandmother as a young woman, probably in her early 20s, with another woman around the same age. The other woman was striking dark hair, sharp features, an intense gaze. In every photo, they were close. Arms around each other, heads tilted together, looking at each other with expressions that were unmistakably intimate. There were pictures of them at the beach, at restaurants, in what looked like an apartment. In one photo, they were both wearing matching rings. At the bottom of the trunk was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, dated November 15, 1956. The headline read, "Local woman missing, family fears foul play." The article was about a 24-year-old woman named Vivian Hartley who had disappeared from Millbrook without a trace. She'd last been seen leaving her job at the town library on November 12. Her apartment had been found neat and orderly, with no signs of struggle, but several of her belongings were missing. Her family was frantic. The police had no leads. Vivian Hartley. V. I sat in that dusty attic for 2 hours, reading every letter, looking at every photo, reading that newspaper article over and over. My grandmother, proper, conservative, church-going Eleanor Sutton, had been in love with a woman who'd disappeared in 1956. A disappearance that had never been solved, that was still listed as one of Millbrook's greatest mysteries. I did what any millennial would do in my position. I googled Vivian Hartley Millbrook, Washington disappearance. There wasn't much online. This had happened almost 70 years ago, long before the internet. But I found a few references. A blog post from 2010 about unsolved mysteries in Washington state. A mention in a book about missing persons cases. A few old newspaper articles that had been digitized. The basic facts were these: Vivian Hartley had moved to Millbrook in 1952 with her family. She'd worked at the library and been described as quiet and bookish. She'd had no known enemies, no romantic entanglements, no reason to run away. She'd simply vanished one night in November 1956. Her car was found abandoned at the edge of town. Her bank account was never touched. She was never seen or heard from again. The case went cold within a year. Her family eventually moved away. As far as I could tell from my research, Vivian Hartley was still officially a missing person. I knew I should probably go home, process all this, maybe talk to my mom about it. Instead, I went to the Millbrook Public Library. The library was in a new building now, but they had an archive section with old records and photographs. The librarian, a friendly woman in her 50s named Karen, seemed thrilled that someone was interested in local history. "I'm researching the Vivian Hartley disappearance," I told her. "For a project?" Karen's eyes lit up. "Oh, that case. So tragic. I've lived here my whole life, and people still talk about it sometimes. She actually worked here, you know. Well, not in this building, but in the old library. Did you know her?" "Oh no, honey, this was way before my time. But there are some old employment records in the archives if you want to look through them." She set me up at a table with several boxes of materials from the 1950s. Employment records, event programs, photographs of library staff and events. I found Vivian quickly. There were several photos of her at work shelving books, helping patrons, sitting at the circulation desk. She looked exactly like she had in the photos with my grandmother. Beautiful, serious, with that same intense gaze. In one photo, a group shot of the library staff at a holiday party in 1955, I spotted someone else I recognized. In the back row, standing slightly apart from the others, was my grandmother. Young, maybe 23 years old, looking directly at Vivian on the other side of the group. "Did you find what you needed?" Karen asked, coming to check on me. "Actually, Can I ask you something? Do you know anything about Eleanor Sutton? She would have been around the same time as Vivian Hartley. Karen's expression shifted slightly. Eleanor Sutton? Of course. She died recently, didn't she? Lovely woman. She was a teacher here for years. Why do you ask? She was my grandmother, I said. Oh. I'm so sorry for your loss. Eleanor was wonderful. So dedicated to the community. Did she ever talk about Vivian Hartley? I'm trying to understand what happened. Karen looked uncomfortable. I wouldn't know about that, dear. That was all before my time. But... She hesitated. There were always rumors, you know. About Vivian. About why she really disappeared. What kind of rumors? She lowered her voice, even though we were alone in the archive room. People said she was, well, they said she wasn't quite normal. You understand what I mean? I understood exactly what she meant. She was gay. Karen looked scandalized that I'd said it out loud. Well. That was the rumor. And in those days, people like that, they had to hide. Or leave. The town wasn't kind to that sort of thing. So people think she ran away. Some did. Others thought maybe something worse happened. That someone found out about her and... Well. It was different times. I thanked Karen and left, my mind racing. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was heartbreaking. My grandmother and Vivian Hartley had been in love. In 1950s small-town Washington, where being gay could get you fired, ostracized, or worse. They'd hidden their relationship, but at some point, Vivian had wanted more. Wanted them to leave together, to build a life somewhere they could be open. And my grandmother had said no. Had chosen conformity and safety over love. Had married my grandfather, her first husband, who died in 1978, in 1957, just a year after Vivian disappeared. Had lived a conventional life, raised a family, became a pillar of the community. While Vivian vanished. But did she really just run away? Or had something else happened? I spent the next 2 days becoming obsessed with finding out. I went through every document in that trunk. I searched online archives. I even drove to the county records office to look at old police reports, most of which had been destroyed or lost. Then I found something that changed everything. In a box at the very bottom of the trunk, under the wedding dress and letters, there was a small leather journal. My grandmother's handwriting filled every page. It wasn't a regular diary, there were no entries about daily life or mundane events. It was specifically about Vivian. The entries started in 1952, when they'd first met, and continued sporadically through 1957. Reading them felt like invading my grandmother's most private thoughts, but I couldn't stop. The early entries were sweet, almost giddy. Saw V at the library today. She recommended a book to me. Her hands brushed mine when she gave it to me and I felt electricity. V and I had coffee. We talked for 3 hours. I've never felt so understood by anyone. They became more intense. I'm in love with her. I've never said that out loud, barely even let myself think it, but it's true. I love Vivian Hartley. Then worried. Father suspects something. He keeps asking why I spend so much time at the library. I told him I'm studying. He doesn't believe me. Then anguished. V wants us to leave. Go to San Francisco or New York, somewhere we can be together openly. I want that too, more than anything. But I'm so afraid. Of disappointing my family. Of what people would say. Of losing everything I've known. The entries from late 1956 were painful to read. I told V I can't go with her. That I'm not brave enough. She cried. I've never seen her cry before. She begged me to reconsider. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to so badly. But I couldn't make the words come out. V is leaving. She says she has to, that staying here loving me when I won't love her back publicly is killing her. I told her I do love her. She said love without courage is just cowardice. Then, dated November 13, 1956. The day after Vivian was last seen. V came to see me last night. Late, after my parents were asleep. She wanted one last chance for me to change my mind. She was leaving town, she said. Going somewhere far away where she could start over. She asked me one more time to come with her. I said no. She left angry. Hurt. I wanted to run after her. I didn't. I let her walk away. I let her go. And now she's gone, and everyone thinks something terrible happened to her, but I know the truth. She left because of me. Because I wasn't brave enough to choose her. I kept reading. The police came to question me. They know V and I were friends. I lied and said we barely knew each other, just casual acquaintances from the library. I'm terrified they'll find the letters she sent me. I burned them all. I wanted to keep them but I couldn't risk it. Wait. She burned the letters? But I'd found dozens of them in the trunk. I looked at the letters again, more carefully this time. And then I realized these weren't letters Vivian had sent to my grandmother. These were copies. Letters my grandmother had written to Vivian but never sent. All those passionate, longing letters begging V to come home, to forgive her, to give them another chance. My grandmother had written them all. After Vivian left. And never mailed a single one. The journal entries continued. V's family is frantic. They think she's been murdered. The whole town is searching for her. I know she's alive somewhere, starting a new life without me. Part of me is relieved. Part of me wants to die. I'm engaged to Leonard. He's a good man. Kind, stable, everything my parents wanted for me. I don't love him the way I loved V. I don't think I'll ever love anyone that way again. But this is what normal looks like. This is what safe looks like. This is the choice I made. The entries became less frequent after that. A few scattered thoughts over the years. Leonard and I got married today. I wore white. I smiled for all the photos. I felt nothing. Had a baby girl. Named her Patricia, after my mother. She's beautiful. I wish V could see her. It's been 10 years since V left. I still think about her every day. I wonder if she thinks about me. I wonder if she found someone else. I hope she did. I hope she's happy. I hope she hates me. The last entry was dated 1994, almost 40 years after Vivian disappeared. I'm an old woman now. V would be old too, if she's still alive. Sometimes I let myself imagine that she is. That she's somewhere warm and bright, with a partner who was brave enough to love her openly, with a life full of joy and freedom. Other times I wonder if I made a terrible mistake letting her go. If I should have been braver. If we could have had 50 years together instead of the 2 secret years we did have. But I can't change the past. I made my choice. I chose safety over love, conformity over happiness, fear over courage. And I've had to live with that choice every day since. The house I live in, the life I built, it's all a monument to my own cowardice. I hope V forgives me. I hope she found happiness. I hope she doesn't waste a moment thinking about the woman who was too afraid to fight for her. I closed the journal and sat in my grandmother's attic, crying. My wonderful, proper, conservative grandmother had been hiding a broken heart for 70 years. She'd lived an entire life shaped by one choice she'd made at 24, the choice to let love walk away because she was too scared to hold on to it. And Vivian Hartley, the missing woman whose disappearance had haunted Millbrook for decades, hadn't been murdered or kidnapped. She'd simply left. Chosen herself over a love that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. I know I should probably leave it at that. I'd solved the mystery, at least for myself. I knew what had really happened. I understood my grandmother in a way I never had before. I could grieve her not just as my grandmother but as a full person with a complicated past and deep regrets. But I couldn't let it go. Because Vivian Hartley was still officially missing. Her family had died never knowing what happened to her. And somewhere out there, if she was still alive, she was an old woman who might want to know that Eleanor Sutton had loved her. Had regretted her choice. Had kept every photograph, every memento, every scrap of their relationship hidden in a trunk in the attic for 70 years. So I started trying to find Vivian Hartley. This is where the story gets complicated, because I'm still in the middle of it. I'm still searching. But I'll tell you what I've found so far. I hired a private investigator, cost me a chunk of my savings, but I didn't care. I gave him everything I had. The dates, the cities Vivian had written from in those unsent letters, her full name and date of birth, her physical description. He started running searches, checking records, following leads. While he did that, I kept digging into Millbrook's history. I talked to elderly residents who'd been around in the 1950s. Most didn't remember much about Vivian, or if they did, they weren't willing to talk about the unnatural woman who'd disappeared. But one woman, 93 years old, living in the town's only nursing home, remembered. Her name was Dorothy Chambers, and she'd worked at the library with Vivian. I knew she was different, Dorothy told me, her eyes sharp despite her age. The way she'd look at Eleanor Sutton when she came in. The way they'd find excuses to talk. I wasn't surprised when Vivian left. You knew she left? Not that something happened to her. Dorothy nodded slowly. I saw her that last night. November 12, 1956. I was walking home late from a church event. I saw Vivian loading boxes into her car. She looked determined. Free, almost. When I heard she'd disappeared, I knew she'd run. And I never told anyone, because I figured she had her reasons. Did you know where she went? No. But I remember she had a friend in California. A woman from college. They wrote to each other. I remember because I used to stamp the outgoing mail at the library, and I saw letters addressed to a Sarah something in San Francisco. San Francisco? Where Vivian had wanted to go with my grandmother. The private investigator is following that lead now. We're searching San Francisco records from the late 1950s onward, looking for any trace of Vivian Hartley or any variation of that name she might have used. It's a long shot. Even if we find her, she might be dead. She'd be 92 now. Or she might not want to be found. Might have spent 70 years building a life far away from Millbrook and Eleanor Sutton and everything that hurt her. But I have to try. For my grandmother, who kept this love hidden her entire life. For Vivian, whose disappearance has been a mystery for so long when the truth was so much simpler and sadder than anyone imagined. And for myself, because knowing this story, I can't just leave it unfinished. Last week, the private investigator called me. He'd found something. A woman named Vivian Hart, note the slightly different last name, who'd lived in San Francisco from 1957 until 2019. She'd been a librarian just like the Vivian from Millbrook. She'd never married. She'd lived with a roommate named Sarah Chen for 43 years until Sarah's death in 2000. Vivian Hart had died in 2019 at the age of 87. Peacefully, in a care facility, with no surviving family. But here's the thing that makes me think it was her, the thing that makes my heart break and soar at the same time. When the investigator pulled her obituary, it mentioned that she'd requested her ashes be scattered in the San Juan Islands in Washington state. Not in California where she'd lived for 60+ years. But in Washington. Near where she'd grown up. Near Millbrook. The obituary also mentioned that she'd been a lifelong advocate for LGBTQ rights, had marched in the first Pride Parade in San Francisco, had donated extensively to organizations supporting queer youth. She'd lived the life my grandmother had been too afraid to live. She'd been open and proud and free. She'd found love with Sarah and made a home and built a community. But she'd wanted her ashes brought back to Washington. Back near the place she'd run from. Near the woman who'd broken her heart. I'm going to San Francisco next month. The investigator found Sarah Chen's nephew, who inherited Vivian's belongings. He's agreed to meet with me, to let me see if there's anything that might confirm whether his aunt's Vivian was my grandmother's Vivian. I don't know what I'm hoping to find. A photo of them together? Letters my grandmother actually sent? Proof that Vivian thought about Eleanor over the years, that she forgave her, that she understood? Or maybe I'm hoping to find nothing. To let Vivian remain a woman who escaped, who built a beautiful life, who didn't spend 70 years pining for someone who'd chosen fear over love. I don't know. I just know I have to see this through. In the meantime, I've been slowly renovating my grandmother's house. My house now. I'm keeping it, I decided. Not selling. I'm going to move in, leave Seattle, maybe get a job teaching in Millbrook like my grandmother did. There's something about this house, about this story, that feels unfinished. Like I'm meant to be here, meant to uncover this, meant to do something with what I've learned. I've been thinking a lot about choices. About the ones my grandmother made, choosing safety over love, conformity over happiness, fear over courage. About how those choices shaped her entire life, left her with regrets she carried for 70 years. And about the choices Vivian made, choosing herself, choosing freedom, choosing to walk away from a love that couldn't exist openly rather than hide in shadows forever. Neither choice was wrong, exactly. They were just different responses to an impossible situation. To living in a time and place that didn't allow them to be who they were. I'm lucky. I live in a time where I can be openly bisexual without losing my job or my family. Where I can marry whoever I want. Where pride flags fly in Millbrook's town square during June. My grandmother and Vivian didn't have that luxury. But reading my grandmother's journal, seeing the life she could have had, I understand viscerally how important it is to be brave. To choose love over fear. To take risks on happiness even when the safe path seems easier. I've been single since college, too scared of getting hurt to really put myself out there. Too comfortable in my safe, small life to take chances. Reading about my grandmother's regrets has made me realize I don't want to end up like her, safe and respected and deeply unhappy, carrying a secret heartbreak for 70 years. So I'm making changes. Moving to Millbrook. Renovating this house that holds so much hidden history. Trying to find Vivian, or at least understand her story. And maybe, eventually, being brave enough to open my own heart to the possibilities my grandmother couldn't allow herself. I've started wondering what I'll do if I confirm that Vivian Hart was my grandmother's Vivian. If I find proof of their relationship, their love story. Should I tell my family? My mom doesn't know her mother was bisexual, was in love with a woman, carried that secret her whole life. Will it change how she remembers her? Will it hurt her to know her mother lived with that kind of pain? Or should I keep it secret, the way my grandmother did? Let her be remembered as proper, conventional Eleanor Sutton, beloved teacher and community pillar? I'm leaning toward telling the truth. Not splashing it all over town. My grandmother's privacy still matters, even after death. But telling my mom, my uncle, the people who loved her. Letting them know the full person she was, complicated and scared and deeply loving. Because I think that's what my grandmother would want, if she could tell me herself. I think she kept the trunk, kept all those letters and photos and that journal, because some part of her hoped someone would find them someday. Would know her full story. Would understand that she'd loved and lost and regretted and persevered. She wanted to be known, even if she was too afraid to be known in life. So I'll tell her story. I'll honor her love for Vivian. I'll try to find out what happened to Vivian and whether she lived a happy life. And I'll live in this house and remember every day that love, real, brave, risky love, is always worth fighting for. Even when it's scary. Even when it costs you something. Even when the world tells you it's wrong or impossible or too dangerous. Because the alternative is what my grandmother had: a safe, respectable life built on the foundation of one moment when she chose fear over everything else. And I think that's the saddest thing in the world. I'm writing this from the attic right now, sitting next to that trunk that started this whole journey. The wedding dress is laid out next to me, Vivian's wedding dress, I'm sure of it now, the one she'd bought hoping my grandmother would run away with her. I'm going to preserve it properly. Frame some of the photographs. Keep the journal safe. Turn this attic into a sort of memorial to a love story that deserved better than it got. And in 3 weeks, I'm going to San Francisco to meet Sarah Chen's nephew and see if I can find the end of this story. Or maybe the beginning of understanding it. I'll update when I know more. When I've made the trip, seen what there is to see, decided what to do with everything I've learned. Until then, I'm living in my grandmother's house. Sleeping in her bedroom, walking through rooms where she lived for 70 years carrying this secret. Trying to understand her. Trying to forgive her for not being brave enough, while also understanding that bravery looks different in different eras. And trying to learn from her mistakes so I don't spend my own life wondering what if. If you're reading this and you're in love with someone, tell them. If you're scared to take a risk on happiness, take it anyway. If you're living a safe life that makes you deeply unhappy, change it. Because my grandmother couldn't do those things. Vivian had to run away to do them. But you can. We can. We live in a time when it's possible to choose love over fear, even when it's hard. Don't waste that gift. Don't wait 70 years to wish you'd been braver. Learn from Eleanor and Vivian. Honor their story by living differently than they could. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I think my grandmother would want. And maybe, if I find Vivian's story has a happy ending, if she lived a full, joyful, open life in San Francisco with Sarah, surrounded by chosen family and community and pride, maybe that will be enough. Maybe knowing that one of them, at least, chose bravery and found happiness will make the sadness of my grandmother's choice a little easier to bear. I hope so. I really, really hope so. Update, 1 month later. I went to San Francisco last week. Met with David Chen, Sarah's nephew and Vivian's heir. He's a kind man in his 50s, a professor at Berkeley, who remembered his Aunt Vivian with obvious love. She was incredible, he told me over coffee. Fierce and brilliant and so brave. She and Aunt Sarah were together until Sarah died. They couldn't legally marry until 2008, but they'd been committed to each other for 50 years by then. They were my model for what love should look like. I showed him the photos of young Vivian in Millbrook, with my grandmother. He stared at them for a long time. I never saw pictures of her this young, he said quietly. She never talked about her life before San Francisco. Said she'd left everything behind to start fresh. But sometimes, late at night, she'd get sad. Sarah would hold her and ask if she was thinking about Millbrook, about Eleanor. Vivian would nod but wouldn't talk about it. My heart stopped. She talked about Eleanor? My grandmother. Just her first name. I only heard it a few times over the years. Sarah knew more, I think, but she never told me the details. Just that there had been someone before her, someone Vivian had loved who couldn't love her back the way she needed. Someone who'd broken her heart so badly she had to run away to survive it. He took me to his house and showed me boxes of Vivian's belongings he'd been meaning to sort through. Photos, books, letters. And there, in a small box labeled personal, I found them. Letters from my grandmother. Postmarked from Millbrook. Dated from 1957 through 2014. My grandmother had written to her. For 57 years, she'd written letters to Vivian. And Vivian had kept every single one. I asked David if I could read them. He hesitated, then nodded. They weren't love letters, exactly. They were updates. I got married today. I wish you could have been there. I wish I was marrying you instead. I had a baby. A little girl. She's beautiful. I named her Patricia, but I almost named her Vivian. Leonard died. Everyone thinks I'm heartbroken. But all I can think is that I'm free now, and it's too late, and you're gone, and I wasted so much time. And then, in 2014, 2 years before my grandmother died, I'm dying, v cancer. They say I have maybe a year. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of dying without telling you the truth. I loved you. I never stopped loving you. Letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life. I hope you found happiness. I hope you don't hate me. I hope, somehow, you knew I loved you all along. Even when I was too much of a coward to fight for you. Especially then. Eleanor. At the bottom of the box was a letter I recognized. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by someone elderly or ill. It was dated 2015, from San Francisco, addressed to my grandmother's house in Millbrook. It had been returned. Marked returned to sender, deceased. I opened it with shaking hands. Eleanor, it began. I got your letter. Your final letter. I'm old now, and tired, and I don't have time for pretending anymore, so I'm going to tell you the truth. I loved you. Past tense. I loved you so much it nearly destroyed me. Leaving you was the hardest thing I ever did. But it was also the thing that saved my life. I built something beautiful here. I found Sarah and love and community, and pride. I lived openly and honestly in a way we never could have in Millbrook. And I'm grateful for that. But Eleanor, I never forgot you. I kept your letters. All of them. Every single one over 57 years. Not because I was holding on to hope. But because they reminded me of the girl you were when we first met. The girl who was brave enough to love me even when the world said she shouldn't. That girl made the wrong choice. But she made it out of fear, not cruelty. I forgive you. I forgave you years ago. I hope you found some measure of happiness in your life. I hope you weren't too lonely. And I hope, when you die, you're not afraid. Because wherever we go next, I believe we'll see each other again. And maybe there, we can have the life we should have had here. With love, now and always V. The letter had never reached my grandmother. She'd died in 2016, never knowing that Vivian had forgiven her, had loved her, had kept her letters for over half a century. They'd both held on to each other in secret, both carried the weight of what they'd lost, both died without knowing the other had never really let go. I'm crying as I write this. Sitting in David Chen's living room, holding 2 old women's love letters, understanding that my grandmother's greatest regret and Vivian's deepest hurt had both been real and valid and heartbreaking. David let me keep the letters. I think that's what Aunt Vivian would have wanted, he said. I think she'd want Eleanor's family to know her story. To know they loved each other. To know it mattered. So now I have both sides of the story. My grandmother's unsent letters and journals, and Vivian's carefully preserved correspondence. Two women who loved each other but couldn't be together. Who both made choices, one to stay, one to go, and spent the rest of their lives wondering what if. I'm going to tell my family. I'm going to honor both Eleanor and Vivian by making sure their love story is known and remembered. I'm going to frame those photos from the attic, keep the letters safe, maybe even write a book about them someday. Because this is history. Queer history that was hidden and secret and almost lost. Two women who loved each other in a time when that love could cost them everything. Who both paid the price in different ways, one by losing herself in conformity, one by losing her home and the woman she loved. Their story deserves to be told. And I think, somehow, they'd both be okay with that. I'm bringing Vivian's last letter to my grandmother's grave today. I'm going to read it out loud, there in the cemetery, so at least in some metaphysical way, my grandmother will finally know that she was loved, forgiven, remembered. That she mattered. That their love mattered. Even though it ended in heartbreak, even though they both spent decades apart, even though neither of them got the happy ending they deserved. It still mattered. Love always matters. Even when it's scared. Even when it fails. Even when it's just two women in a small town in 1954, holding hands in secret, dreaming of a future that would never come. It still mattered. And I'm going to make sure no one forgets that.